apparently, everything is the cleaner's fault. Hello, and welcome back to the Cleaning Lady podcast. Last week, I talked about the times that cleaners genuinely do accidentally damage things in clients' homes because accidents happen. When you're cleaning inside people's houses all day, every day, eventually something is going to get broken. But this week, I want to talk to you about the other side of it. The times that cleaners get blamed for things that they absolutely did not do. And honestly, once you work in domestic cleaning long enough, you realise that apparently everything is the cleaner's fault. Missing items? Cleaner. Broken item? Cleaner. World War II suitcase strap that's mysteriously disappeared? Definitely the cleaner. And I will get onto that story very soon. It is a crazy, crazy story. But as cleaners, we work inside people's private homes. We're around their belongings all day. So when something goes missing or gets broken or even just moves slightly, the cleaner is usually the first person that the client suspects. Now, thankfully, most clients are lovely and reasonable. But over the years, I've had some absolutely bizarre accusations. And this episode is about those particular and peculiar encounters, one of which involved my wonderful cleaner, Marina. She was an absolute A-star cleaner, the best cleaner I'd ever had. And she was so brilliant that we actually nicknamed her Miraculous Marina because she could clean to an unbelievably high standard, even with very fussy clients. So one morning, one of her clients, Phil, rang me in a complete panic. His son had borrowed this old World War II suitcase from a friend. It was for a school project. And apparently part of the strap had gone missing. Now, this suitcase was very old and worn, but understandably, the client was very stressed because he had to return it to the owner and there was no strap. Now, the suitcase, he said, was next to the kitchen bin, and the suitcase strap had kind of come apart from the suitcase. It was so old, it had just come apart from the suitcase. But he couldn't find this strap, this handle of the suitcase. So he asked if I could ask Marina if she'd seen it. So I asked Marina if she'd seen it, and she said that she remembered vaguely seeing like a bit of fabric on the floor next to the kitchen bin. So she thought that it was meant to have gone into the bin because it was on the floor next to the bin. So she picked it up, put it in the bin, and took it outside to the big trash bin. But Phil became absolutely convinced that Marina had taken it home. I guess that, once people get something into their heads, then sometimes logic completely goes out the window. He kept ringing me throughout the day. And I remember one of the things he said was, well, if she's innocent, then why doesn't she come and go through the bin herself if she thinks it's in there? And then then the next phone call was, if she just admits that she's taken it, as long as she brings it back by the morning, then nothing else will ever be said about it. And I was just like, oh my God, are you serious? She was so upset. She was devastated because she really liked cleaning for that family. And that's what people don't realise. These accusations genuinely upset cleaners, well, anybody. And, Marina was such an honest person. She was so lovely. And she was so distressed that someone thought that she would steal something so absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, the suitcase was returned to its original owner, and they weren't remotely bothered about the missing strap because they knew that it was so old anyway. But despite that, Phil decided that he no longer trusted our services and cancelled the cleaning. Honestly, he actually said that he didn't trust our services. So another accusation that honestly still makes me laugh about today was about a stone, a literal stone. One of my cleaners, Ellen, cleaned for a brand new client, and I always like to check everything afterwards and make sure the clean's gone well. And I rang the client and she said that the cleaning itself was excellent. However, there was a small heart-shaped stone, pebble from the beach, that had been sitting on top of the toilet and it wasn't there now. So instead of assuming that maybe it had fallen somewhere, the client immediately jumped to the cleaner must have taken it. But not only that, she started saying how uncomfortable she felt because now the cleaner knew where she lived and she was worried about retaliation. Retaliation over a pebble? Ellen was absolutely horrified because she'd been with me for years, actually. But it turned out that the stone had simply fallen behind the toilet while she was cleaning. And Ellen had actually noticed it, but she couldn't retrieve it without something like a wire coat hanger or something. But the client was actually on a work call at the time, so she hadn't been able to explain before she left. But the immediate assumption was cleaner equals thief. And I do think people become incredibly paranoid about letting people into their homes. And I understand trust is a big thing, of course it is. But some people just seem to convince themselves that something sinister is happening when there's usually a perfectly normal explanation. Then there was Zaza. Now, Zaza was a very eccentric landlady and she rented out rooms to this shared house that she owned. And she was always kind of hovering around, annoying the tenants, I think. But one of my cleaners, Aniko, she cleaned all the communal areas, so kitchen, bathrooms, hallways, that kind of thing. And she did that every couple of weeks. Never had any problems there. But one day, Zaza called me and she said that the kitchen floor was really, really sticky and she wanted to know what Aniko had used on it. Now, yes, using too much floor cleaner can make a floor sticky, but Nico was a very experienced cleaner and, she wasn't likely to make that kind of mistake. So I gently suggested that maybe one of the tenants possibly could have spilled something. And I was immediately shut down. Like she just said, no, impossible. They're all professional people. So apparently, professional people never spill drinks. But she insisted that someone needed to return the next day to redo the floor because it was unfair on her tenants. Fair enough. I said I'd go back the next day, and then I could maybe just kind of see what it was on the floor that had made it so sticky. So the next morning, I actually got a very apologetic voicemail. I didn't need to go back after all, because it turned out that one of the tenants had spilled an entire can of lager on the floor and attempted to clean it up using a dry tea towel with no water. So they'd basically just smeared sticky beer all over the whole kitchen floor. But of course, initially, it must have been the cleaner. And honestly, cleaners get blamed for absolutely everything. I've had clients accuse cleaners of stealing chocolate that their own children had eaten. I've had people accuse cleaners of stealing jewellery that later turned up under a pile of clothes. I've had clients panic because something has moved slightly on a bedside table. And I think what people forget is that cleaners are human beings. They're trying to do their jobs. Most cleaners are honest, hard-working people who just want to get through the day, do a good clean, and go home. But you can't just go home and switch off when you've got somebody accusing you of something hanging over you. And when you accuse someone of taking something or doing something that they haven't done, it genuinely affects them. So if you've got a cleaner and something goes missing, before assuming the worst, check behind your toilet first. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode of the Cleaning Lady podcast.